Hello again, friends and fans. Raptor here. Welcome back to Wargame Red Dragon as we talk about what the deck. It's time for planes now. Look up in the sky. It's a bird. It's a plane. No, it is actually planes. Yeah. So we're going to cover aircraft here today as we sit in our armory. Again, remember this is just going over exactly what these vehicles are capable of and not necessarily a suggestion over one vehicle or another. We'll get to making decks a little bit later, and of course we'll cover different nations and different specialties and things at a later time. But for now, we're just going over the basics of things to show you what the difference between, for instance, a bomber versus a seed aircraft can do, and I'll go ahead and explain all of that to you now. So we're starting here with one of America's oldest aircrafts, the A4f Sky Hawk 2. That is made in 1956, so this has probably seen action in both Korea and or Vietnam as well. Of course, Korea was a little earlier. Maybe this have seen action, and maybe even Korea could have ended before then. But really, this is a really nice weapon for taking care of enemy infantry. It's a very light bomber for 50 points. And one thing you need to keep in mind for aircraft is they are an extremely special unit where you must, for the remainder of this video, think of them as a completely different thing, including the naval tab. These are like picking out a special attack. Really, when you're putting these into your deck, you need to think to yourself, what have I been seeing lately in the game? What have people been doing a lot? What have I been having trouble with? If you've been dealing with a lot of infantry, well then bombers that carry napalm and 227 kilogram bombs are probably your thing. Now, these weapons here, or at least this aircraft, though it has twin Colt Mark 12s on it, 20mm cannons, they're really not recommended for anything other than flying in bombs on troops that are sheltered somewhere. And with Wargame Red Dragon having the option of limiting the years for engagement, the Sky Hawk 2, depending on what year you're playing and if people have limited the room, could be just as effective as a Nighthawk, depending on, of course, what the situation is. And we'll go over what the benefits of that are a little bit later. So keep in mind that you can call out or you can queue a total of, let's see, 9 aircraft, according to what I can remember in Wargame Red Dragon. Down in the lower left-hand corner, when you're playing a game, you'll see what looks to be like a telephone keypad with blank spaces, and that's where your aircraft will go. Now, it's recommended that you call out at least have one aircraft ready to call out in your deck at all times, which means before a match starts, in your party, you should at least have one person playing air superiority, and you should have bought it before the start just in case you see a ton of aircraft. Now, what's interesting about the A4f Sky Hawk 2 is that if you see a ton of enemy Su-27s or something coming for this, it's not really going to be that effective. If you have a lot of these aircraft doing runs, this can fly 600 kilometers per hour, which is pretty okay. Well, not really, but if you have several of these out, you could lure the enemy to call out their air superiority aircraft. You're only risking 50 points. And if you destroy, for instance, one of their higher level MiG-31s, because they're coming after this, you're up 100 and something points, 140 points possibly. Plus, you've also destroyed an enemy air superiority fighter. So these are very good for what you've probably seen in my videos, quote-unquote, lure and skewer. This allows you to make the enemy call out their aircraft, follow it back to your AA line, and destroy enemy targets. This is available for the Marines as well, and there's different versions. Keep in mind, aircraft are not amphibious. Oh, Raptor. And also the same goes for helicopters, of course. They can fly over anything, anywhere. They can go over mountains, and they even use some of the, I guess, out of boundaries outside the map to make their big turns. Keep in mind that the TTT, or time over target, is a new thing that's also effective. Lets you know that you have 85 seconds you can fly before evacuation. So this aircraft can stay on station in the air for 85 seconds in the game before it has to be called back to base to refuel. So once it arrives on the battlefield, you have 85 seconds to pick a target or intimidate the enemy, and then it's time for you to get out. Let's go on to the A4M Sky Hawk 2, which is the same aircraft, just armed with, wow, it actually has ECM of 20% on it. It must have a cooler paint job. The enemy is resistant to shooting at it. Made in 1971 as well, and has Zuni Mark 32, 127 rockets totaling 16. So you have a pretty good range on those. By the way, those are only meant to fire at the ground, so for those of you who like to play War Thunder, these are not air-to-air missiles. These are not air-to-air rockets. They must only engage ground targets, as were the Twin Colt can engage anything. And that also includes aircraft can also bomb naval units. And we'll go into the naval tab a little bit later where there are more specialized aircraft for the Navy. So keep that in mind as well. But so anyway, the Sky Hawk, very good lure and skewer. This is very good against infantry. And that's what I think we'll cover first is anti-infantry units and or weapons that basically drop bombs. Then moving on, speaking of bombs, the A7E Corsair 2 does carry bombs as well. Very weird looking aircraft, kind of ugly, but it has its charm. It really looks beautiful from behind. Dad ass, but it's got a big mouth on it. It looks like a fish. Glop. Really hungry. So this carries a 20 millimeter Vulcan cannon on it, which is pretty damn good for taking out other aircraft. This was made in 1970, by the way. So again, for those of you who are playing low point games, this could be pretty good in taking out enemy aircraft. It has a 30% ECM on it, and air detection is good, and the speed is pretty up there at 750 for a aircraft from this era. It carries two 340 kilogram bombs as well, and the best way I would say for dropping bombs is to use your fire key and indicate the target. If you have line of sight on infantry in a village, and suddenly smoke is popped or something, these will break off and or may not attack the target if they don't have line of sight anymore. Don't take the risk. Just make sure you drop those bombs. And keep in mind the aircraft will also automatically evac, whether it's the Sky Hawk or the Sky Hawk 2, once they're out of their, I guess you could say their secondary, or their, really this is the primary armament. A lot of these aircraft in the left side, not all of them, but a lot of them will have a cannon on the left side, and their main munition will be in the middle and or the right side. So keep in mind, once you drop your bombs, these aircraft will automatically evac. You can also make them evac on their own, or they will evac as you see the TTT, or time over target, expires as well. Keep an eye on those. Those are subject to change, as I always mention. Everything could change. You never know. Maybe tomorrow the Corsair 2 will carry 4 napalm bombs rather than just 2. You never know. In fact, they're not even fully attached. They're just hovering there. Oh, magic. All right, so we'll move on then to some more bombers. We'll then move on to both cluster and heavy bombers as well. Heavy bombers just meaning that they carry more bombs. We'll move on then to the, here we are, the Aardvark. The Aardvark, a very interesting looking aircraft. Reminds me of the Su-22, I think, is also a bomber. I forget exactly, but I can picture it now. This, however, carries 12 227 kilogram bombs, which are perfect for destroying pretty much everything. In fact, it can finish off units. It can destroy any infantry that are in villages, and for 115 points, this can come in at 1,000 kilometers per hour, and it has pretty good air detection as well. It can fire all of its bombs in one quick run, as you see, 100 rounds per minute, so it'll pretty much drop them and then evac immediately. These are very good for taking out really infantry, as I mentioned, and or enemy columns. If you call this out aiming down a road, you can drop bombs along a road and destroy everything in the convoy, so keep that in mind. However, this isn't very good for destroying everything. This is not good for tanks. Though I said it can destroy everything, it does have the possibility to do so. However, it's not a guarantee. If you have heavy armor and you want to kill absolutely every MF in the room, then call out the Aardvark F. That is just marked. That just carries. The only difference between these are the years, and there's no other difference to the aircraft from what I can see. Only 60 seconds, by the way. You got 1 minute to figure out what you're going to do with this aircraft once you call it out. But the F Aardvark can call out, or rather is armed with 12 245 kilogram cluster bombs. Now, attention everyone, attention. Cluster munitions are a no-go against infantry at this time. They may damage them, they may stun them, but they will not kill them, though cluster bombs should kill and destroy everything. In this game, there are 2 classifications, and cluster bombs are for killing armor, transports, anything vehicle-wise. Though I said this Aardvark is more effective at destroying everything, it is because it does have, well, really, HE power of 10 can destroy a lot in this game. But it's not a guaranteed kill when you're dealing with a convoy of T-64s. And if you want to kill them all, like I said, for 120 points, which is just a 5-point difference, really. Actually, wait. Suppression is 349, and this is 100. So it's also a lot less suppression. So if you hit enemy infantry with these, they're not going to stand stunned for very long. Let's move on to then the king, the pimp daddy of bombs, the the F-117 Nighthawk. I just like looking at it because it's such a bastard. It's such a good weapon, very effective from air-land battle, and very effective still in Wargame Red Dragon. This is especially the best against destroying that one specific unit that's hindering you up. A T-80U that needs to be stunned, this is the weapon for you. It carries the GBU 27/B Paveway 3, which can fire from 3,500 meters, and the stealth on this, by the way, is extremely high. Exceptional stealth, in fact, though it has no ECM. Basically, this weapon will be undetectable until just a few seconds, which means the enemy will not be able to move its troops out of the village or out of the woods. This is very good for finishing off or completely killing conquerors groups and then moving your tanks and vehicles forward. HE power on this weapon, by the way, is 28. That's got to be one of the biggest HE powers in the game. I'm sure there's something more. Of course, feel free to correct me or give any tips down below as always. But this is also a prototype, which means you must be strictly American in order to get this. The turn radius, that's something I should also have mentioned a long time ago. Turn radius is the lower value represents a sharper turn. The lower the turn radius, the better. And that's really truthful. That's something I should have mentioned a while ago. This has a turn radius of 350, as where the Aardvarks really can't turn at all. The Skyhawks are pretty good too at 3 and 350, and also the Intruder that's armed with those napalm canisters. But the Nighthawk is a pretty advanced aircraft, in fact taking flight in 83. Really an interesting, probably one of the most interesting looking planes. It's kind of a smaller brother or cousin to the B-2 bomber, but this really is meant for specific strikes against enemy targets, and it just looks beautiful. In fact, I have as I look over, I have a photograph of one hanging on my wall. So really iconic, really interesting looking. In fact, the reason the cockpit looks so cut up like that is really to deflect enemy radar, which keeps it stealthy. But anyway, that should be it for the bombers, or at least specific bombers. Some of these other multi-role aircraft do carry bombs, and I should mention that the Phantom II also carries napalm, but we'll get to that in a minute. We'll move on then to just regular fighters and mixed role aircraft. But I do want to cover the rest of the... Oh, you know what? I forgot the A6 Intruder. How dare I? The A6 Intruder, I was thinking it was the seed aircraft. I don't believe this carried bombs before, or at least not as many. It may have actually carried napalm, but again, I could be wrong. The A6 Intruder also carries a smaller amount of bombs. It carries 12, actually, which is the same as the Aardvark, isn't it? Wow. So for 60 points, you can carry just as much as the Aardvark does. However... it's not as fast as the Aardvark, so if the enemy is going to get away, that's not so good. Also, the let's see, there's really no different. Oh, wait a minute. You know what? This can also engage for longer than the Aardvark. So if you need to, if you need bombs but you don't need them as quickly, and if it can wait, call out the A6 Intruder. In fact, you call out 2 of these for pretty much the price of 1 Aardvark, so that's not too bad there. Yes, so I did forget that, but however, this is very, very good against... really, I want to just see here if the accuracy of the bombs change at all. But I guess they don't. So, and of course, why would it? The bomb is the same. So again, if you need extra bombs, go ahead and feel free to bring in the A6A Intruder. I thought we had covered that because I went right to the Corsair. But anyway, so that's it for the bombers then, or at least the dedicated bombers. Not all of these carry weapon or machine guns on them or cannons. But again, the A7E Corsair 2 does. Let's move on then to basic multi-role fighters, and that's pretty much what makes up a lot of the American arsenal. We'll get into Seed in just a minute, but for now, the American arsenal, by the way, I would like to know too, the Harrier, both used by the British and American forces in Wargame Red Dragon, and in real life, I'd like to know, and this is a question for you guys, I wonder if this was a joint collaboration between the Brits and the Americans on making this aircraft. It's really a great aircraft. That's a real good multi-role aircraft. It's a VTOL aircraft too, which means it can take off from almost anywhere. It's really... it's got great weapons, but not a great aircraft. I've never really loved the Harrier as much because you never see it specifically used. Though it's a good multi-role aircraft, especially in 1974, it could be the king of the skies. But for both the British and the American forces, they're always armed with such great weapons, but the aircraft itself is slow. The air detection is very high, but no ECM and poor stealth on it, as you see. Turn radius is okay, though. So that's the AV-8 Harrier. Moving up to the AV-8C, I should mention too, by the way, there's going to be a lot. I should stop right here and just go over the weapons. We'll just drop back just for a second to the AV-8A Harrier. Keep close attention on the AAM, or air-to-air missile. The AIM-9 you're going to see a lot, and keep in mind that the A9, J, H, LMNO, PQ, RSTV, WX, LL, 14Q, Strawberry, whatever they call it, that's going to change a lot, and that's going to be the biggest difference on the rest of these aircrafts for air-to-air missiles. The Sparrow, I think it was called the AIM-9 Sparrow. Is that what? No, that's something else. But the AIM-9 Sidewinder, that's what it's called. The Sidewinder missile is probably the most used missile in the game. This is armed on helicopters, and even the Chaparral uses them. Not this specific model, but the Sidewinder itself, just the AIM series, is very, very widely used, and thus is very effective. 40% accuracy on this, and 2 500-kilogram bombs. This is pretty much good if you're taking out a recon group and then happen to shoot down a helicopter as well. Not too bad for the AV-8 Harrier. Stepping up, we now have the Harrier that's armed with the AIM-9L, which has 50% accuracy, and not too much changes in the department of the aircraft other than 20% on the ECM and a faster speed. Now we're talking 30mm cannon, by the way, on both of those, both armed with 150 rounds. So very close to home is where you want to keep this aircraft. Anything that's close to your spawn or anything that's close to your call-out area for aircraft is where you're going to want to keep this. Don't send it deep into enemy territory. It's only 80 seconds on the time over target, and the turn radius makes it an okay fighter. We'll step up then to the AV-8B. Ooh, armed with the 25mm equalizer, the GAU 12 equalizer. Not only can this take out helicopters and airplanes, but also is a pretty capable air-to-ground aircraft. This carries Maverick heat semi-active guided missiles, which means it must fly at the tank until it's destroyed. So keep in mind that this is armed with two? So it's armed with two ATGM missiles. It has a 25mm GAU on it, which I believe is also the same that's mounted on the Warthog, aka the Lightning, So and it's also armed with 2 infrared missiles, which are really, don't use this as your air superiority fighter, though it's armed with a better missile. It's really this, even though it's air superiority as it's marked over here. Oh, multi-role combat. My apologies. But though you would think it would be air superiority with those kinds of weapons, and the 40% accuracy, I would not use this for anything other than air-to-ground combat. Don't use it for air-to-air. Not recommended, but if you want to give it a try, and if things have changed, feel free. But keep in mind, look at all those stats as well. Strength, by the way, is its armor, and as you can see, some of these older aircraft have just as much strength as all the others, so keep in mind, strength will not change for these aircraft. It will change for other things, though. Let's move on then to more multi-role aircraft. We'll probably work our way into air superiority at the same time, but I'm going to work my way to the Strike Eagle, and then we'll go into air superiority. This is the Strike Eagle. It's an air superiority fighter armed with bombs, 4 100-kilogram bombs. This can also engage ground forces, though it doesn't have the same power as the Equalizer does at 25mm. This is a very good multi-role fighter, actually. It's armed with the AIM-9 missile, and as you see, it has 60% accuracy, so very good at taking out enemy aircraft, and also good at dropping bombs. Keep in mind, they're 1,000-kilogram bombs, so these are more effective at taking out tanks than the previous 227-kilogram. So this fighter here is really good for taking out any sort of aircraft you would encounter, so long as you bring them out in numbers, and very good at finishing off aircraft as they kind of are leaving. Use this as more of an ambush aircraft, and those 1,000-pound bombs can break up convoys and get rid of infantry as well. So don't underestimate that. Multi-role, though, I don't use as much, can still be extremely effective. Now, the F-16A and the F-16C are basically the same as the F-15 Strike Eagle in terms of its being a multi-role fighter armed with 2 different weapon types, but this carries cluster. Of course, the aircraft are very different as well. The air detection on the Strike Eagle is very good, as we're on the Fighting Falcon. It's both good and very good with different amounts of ECM, which makes it a much better aircraft to get in deep behind enemy defenses. If you have a Tunguska or something on the field, this might be something you'll want to use to bomb it, though that is extremely risky and not recommended. It is a possibility. The number of bombs that both of these carry do differ as well. Go ahead and keep an eye on your stats, but keep in mind that this is armed with the AIM-9, which is at 40, and the 60, so a big jump for 135 points. Fighting Falcon, not so good at taking out the tanks, I would say. Though it has 6 cluster bombs, if you have 1 or 2 tanks, this is probably what you're going to want to use. But 135 is quite the investment, especially if you were to lose this, and this was both your bomber and your air superiority fighter, or at least your fighter in general. You're going to have a bad time. You'll give the enemy 135 points, and you'll basically lose 2 aircraft, as you'll have lost well, with this Vulcan cannon, it's very good to finish off enemy aircraft as they're retreating with an aircraft like this. But we'll talk in just a minute or two about all the other aircraft, and I should paint a clearer picture as to why I would recommend some tactics to others. And I know there's a lot to cover here, so don't be intimidated. We'll try to cover everything as we go. We'll then move on to, let's see, we do have seed aircraft. We actually have the Phantom, which is also armed, and though the previous one was more of an air superiority. We'll cover the F4s Phantom, which is it's a multi-role aircraft as well, though I would use it for more napalm. It carries 8 bombs of napalm instead, and at 900 kilograms 900 kilometers per hour and 340 kilogram bombs of 8 of them. That will cause a very nice spread on the enemy. Good ECM on it as well, and the air detection is good. And with AIM-9L missiles, if it encounters anything semi decent, I guess it could destroy it, though I'm hesitant because it's not really armed with any sort of as you see, no cannon, which makes me a little nervous. But keep in mind, this is just as good as bringing in the napalm and bringing in the pain. 1979, those 110 points is pretty spendy. We'll look at then the Hornets. The Hornets are pretty much like the F-16 in terms of kind of look and theory. Of course, they're completely different. I know. I'm well aware that the Fighting Falcon is a different aircraft than the Hornet. But the design is sort of the same, as this is more of an upgraded, as where the Fighting Falcon was made in the late 70s. The Hornet was kind of an updated idea from that. Not to mention, these are the two that you'll see firing off aircraft carriers the most often. So the F-18A Hornet, armed with the 20mm cannon, the 4 Maverick missiles, so this could be a great tank buster for use for specific missions, and also carries 2 infrared missiles for the AIM-9 series at 50%. This is one of the fastest multi-role fighters. Comes in at 1,000, just as the previous 2 did. However, this one has very good ECM at 30% and has very good air detection as well, so keep that in mind. Also, 564 rounds, very specific number for the 20mm, and also the upgraded F-18C rather. There's no real differences to these, as you can see, other than the weapon set under the wings. So no real change to the aircraft's looks, though this upgraded version comes with probably a little better radar, as the air detection goes from good or very good to exceptional, and the ECM also rises 40%. To 40% rather. 20mm, again, the Maverick on there. This is the Maverick F though, so the accuracy, what? Oh, it's a fire and forget, that's why. So actually, I was going to say the reload time increased, but the accuracy didn't. Usually they go up by accuracy, but what you can do actually with the upgraded Maverick is you can fire and forget it. So this could actually be really good for running and gunning. So you can run in, shoot off everything, and then get out before the enemy really has a chance to reciprocate. And also 3,325 meters, that's a pretty good range that you can engage enemy units from. Also, it's armed with the AIM-9, and this could be a pretty good fighter. Both of these could be pretty good fighters as well, though really you're probably going to get more from engaging enemy tanks with this on the ground than you would on the air, which means if you destroy enemy tanks, you're probably going to have a lot more progress in the game and gain a lot more than you would by destroying enemy aircraft. Use lure and skewer tactics for that kind of engagement. We'll then go to the F-16C for what I thought was bombs, but actually that should cover all of the multi-role aircraft now, so we can actually bop over to the fighters and multi-role fighters that do also seed. So that's kind of one of the last things we're going to cover. In fact, maybe I'll cover seed, and then we'll come back and do this one as well. A lot of aircraft to cover. That's why you see me kind of reconsidering how I'm going to engage things here. So speaking of engagement, seed. Suppression of enemy air defenses, SEAD. That's what these stand for. And in fact, you can see it's an anti-radiation missile, dedicated anti-air defense missiles, automatically targeting radar-guided vehicles, very accurate against units moving or mounting a radar guidance, thus they're ineffective against any other vehicle. These aircraft, as it's known presently, are good at destroying things radar-based and also naval ships, since they carry radars as well. Not to mention they're the size of, well, a ship, so it's probably not too hard to hit those. This seed can change the entire game. As the accuracy is only 35 on this is still pretty good. Anything 40 and above is going to be fantastic, but the E-86B Prowler is known as a seed aircraft against suppression of enemy air defenses. This aircraft can go in, destroy a Tunguska, so long as the radar is still on, and if you are having trouble with seed aircraft, this is the way to beat them, by turning your radar-guided systems off. For those of you who like playing the Soviet Union, I'll give you a tip. To destroy these aircraft, or at least to not be destroyed by them, if you notice there are certain weapons, like for instance the Tunguska, that has radar-guided machine guns or cannons, but the weapons that are fired secondary, or the infrared weapons, are infrared, thus not affected. So they'll come in thinking they see the Tunguska. You can turn the radar weapons off, and then it will engage with the infrared missiles on board, which could devastate this kind of an aircraft. 50% ECM even means that when they get a lock-on on this kind of aircraft, it's going to be very difficult for them to shoot it down. Though it's not very fast and its turning radius is kind of okay, its time to target is 85 seconds, which means you can kind of sneak around a little bit. And this can see and scan for, or all seed aircraft can scan for radar-based AA without even seeing them. So they're basically like their own recon group, as they can scan for enemy radar signatures and engage. So keep that in mind. Very, very good thing to keep in mind. Also, we have the EF-111A Raven. Now, this is an upgraded version of the Prowler, and for 30 extra points, you get much, much more. You get 2 anti-radar missiles that can engage instead of 4,900 meters, which is very good. This can engage from 50 to 50, and it has only 2 missiles, as where this also has 2 missiles. This excels because it's basically an Aardvark with the craziest paint job ever, which makes its ECM go up to 60. And at 1,000 kilometers per hour, this thing can fly in and destroy and get out. Accuracy is 40, which is pretty good. Not the best, but pretty good. In fact, it's above average, I would say. And it really is going to, if you destroy 2 bucks with this, that could be 85 times 2 in your bank, or 75 for Tunguskas. That can really add up. That's really the price of engaging a tank without even really being shot at. And in fact, these seed aircraft are very, very good at engaging what would destroy them before their counterpart even gets a chance to fire back. And even if they do at 60% ECM, that is a fantastic thing to have. We'll move on then to another seed aircraft before we move on to the fighters, and then finally we'll move on to the secret surprise aircraft. We'll move on then to the Wild Weasel, which is one of the earliest seed aircraft. It also fires the Shriek missile. Shriek? Only 25% accuracy on that, but again, for 1977, that's a pretty good aircraft. This is a multi-role seed aircraft, and again, not highly recommended that you bring something like this in to engage enemy forces. It can definitely defend itself if it's attacked in the air. If you have a direct line of sight on an enemy unit, this carries 4 anti-radar missiles, so you have multiple chances on it. So if you have somewhat inaccurate AA weapons that you need to deal with, you may as well use this semi-inaccurate anti-radar aircraft. The F4G Wild Weasel 5, or V, travels at 900 kilometers per hour and has a 40% ECM as well. So this thing's dedicated to getting behind or getting in the action, firing at the enemy, and getting out before they have a chance to fire back. Also, it's armed with the AIM-9, and this is really the only seed aircraft in the American arsenal that can really fire back and do much against the enemy, other than the Block 52, which is also, nope, never mind, it's not a seed aircraft. I was going to say, I think they added one, but they didn't. So that should conclude the seed aircraft then. So again, you have the Prowler, the Raven, and the Wild Weasel. So think of animals then. Although I don't think a Prowler is an actual animal. Who knows? that's it for seed aircraft then. We'll move on then to finally fighters, what everybody's really probably itching to see. Unfortunately, for those of you who want to see the Tomcat, that is not in the aircraft section anymore. That has been moved to naval. So for those of you who want an air superiority fighter similar to the MiG-31 or the 31M, that's not going to be available here, so just keep that in mind. At least at this present moment, it has been removed. That could have changed, so keep in mind. Always look at your decks before going out into battle. But we'll then move on to some of the earlier air-to-air weapons. Then we'll move on to the earliest, which is going to be the F-15A, built in 1975 or 76, actually. Vulcan, 20 millimeter on it. Very good weapons on here. The AIM-9, which is a medium-range air-to-air missile, and the Sparrow, which is a long-range air-to-air missile. Now, let me explain how these air superiority fighters work. This air superiority fighter will fly in and go after, for instance, let's say an enemy bomber is coming in. Let's say Yak-38 is coming in. As it's targeting the Yak-38, it will first fire the AIM-7 Sparrow, the air-to-air missile that's has a total of 6,300 meter range. It will first fire that weapon, and if it's unsuccessful destroying it at that sort of range, it will then move in with the AIM-9 and fire one or two of those, and then will finally fire the Vulcan weapon. If it hasn't destroyed it with the Sparrow, or if it's damaged it, it'll try to finish it off with the AIM as it closes in, and if it hasn't finished it off yet either then, it will then do that with the Vulcan. Now keep in mind, this is a good aircraft also to call against other air superiority aircraft, though it's a pretty big risk because those other air superiority aircraft could also be armed with the same long-ranged air-to-air, medium-ranged air-to-air, and then their cannon. You may not always win those, so don't expect to win just because you've got a pretty good fighter on your side. You're always going to want to take on fighters with multiple fighters. Always have a wingman. Always tell your teammates to call out one as well, especially if you're trying to take down something like an Su-25. It's going to be easier to finish that off. A lot of armor on that Su-25, and really it can work its way out of the battlefield before any other aircraft. It just always seems to have more armor, and that's just something that we've encountered. We'll then move on to the Eagle C, which has no real change to the aircraft other than the year and the air detection and ECM go up as usual. So no change in time on target or turn radius on that. It doesn't change at all. But we are aimed with the AMRAAM, which I don't know if that'll... Okay, it doesn't say anything about it, but it is a fire and forget weapon that can engage with 60% accuracy. Again, HE power is less on that, but the chance to hit is higher, and no change on the Vulcan either. But there is an AIM-9 missile, which is probably the best one in the arsenal for the Americans, that fires with 60% accuracy. So very capable weapon there as well. We'll then move on to the F-16C Block 52. This is a real crazy weapon here. This has a 40% ECM, exceptional high speed, 300 turning radius, very, very, very tight turns on this thing. This is how you're going to outmaneuver the enemy. It's recommended that you bring an Eagle with a Block 52. This is basically a fighting Falcon, and what will happen is you'll have one of the aircraft square off with the enemy fighter, and then the other one come in from the side. This is armed with the better AMRAAM as well for 150 points, as well as the best. It's basically the best fighter that they have for mobility wise, and really it's going to evade enemy missiles, and it can really get down behind enemy lines and avoid everything, finish off an aircraft and get out of there. So distract with one of the Strike Eagles, or hell, even the Fighting Falcons would be fine to lure, and then finally skewer with the F-16. That's the way you're going to take those down. Now, we also want to mention the F4 Phantom, which has the Sparrow as well, 35% accuracy on that. This is a kind of a lesser accurate air-to-air fighter, and in fact, maybe good to call out actually one of these to get the enemy to really think they can finish it off and then finish them off instead with the F-16. The F4J then is made in 1967. It's actually probably the earliest air superiority fighter, even though I had said the Eagle was one of the earlier ones. This is made in 67 versus... what was it, 76? Yeah, so almost a whole 10 years earlier. Though this isn't really armed with the cannons as most of them are. This is similar to kind of some of the mid-range MiGs that have somewhat really semi-accurate and semi-range missiles. These are, again, really good just to add to the fire support to get the enemy to try to pull off. And in fact, the intimidation factor in this game is something to consider, because if you have an enemy that's called out a lot of aircraft, you may not want to call out aircraft because you think you'll be destroyed, as where they're just a bunch of 70-point aircraft. They could have the air superiority just because they have sheer numbers, which make you not want to call out. Though keep in mind, losing 2 of these could be pretty big. Always keep your aircraft close to you unless you, and that means into the zones you control and have your eyes on. Don't ever go chasing enemy aircraft unless you know for certain or really want to take the risk in order to destroy like an Su-25 towards the end of a game when you really need those points. Again, it's not really recommended to call out aircraft towards the end of a game. It's really only recommended to call them out towards the mid and early game, unless you've really got the advantage. I've seen a lot of players try to capture enemy command zones, and they successfully do. Call out enemy aircraft at the old enemy command location, and then get popped because there's tons of AA around there they neglected to finish off. So be sure not to do that. So I believe we've covered all the aircraft. We've covered the Block 52, the Hornets. We did mention the Phantom, by the way, has napalm bombs on it as well as missiles, so that's an interesting multi-role fighter there. Probably one of the most interesting. You have the Wild Weasel and the Falcon series. You also have the Strike Eagle that's armed with bombs rather than the additional AMRAAM. We covered the Nighthawk and the Aardvark series. We've covered the Raven and the Prowler seed aircraft, as well as the multi-role seed aircraft. The Harriers have also been covered, as well as the Corsair, Intruder, Sky Hawks, but we did not cover, I called it the Lightning Bolt, but the Thunderbolt doesn't matter, baby, because you'll be dead in a flash against this crazy MF. The A10 Thunderbolt 2. The GAU-8 Avenger, 30mm, by the way, which is different than what I had indicated previously for the Harrier that had the 25, the GAU-12 equalizer. This has a GAU-8 equalizer, or Avenger, rather, I should say, the equalizer on the Harrier. Very nice early idea, 83 it was made, but a whole new aircraft was thought up before then in 1978, the A-10 Thunderbolt with the GAU-8 heat cannon on it, round 30mm rounds, and the ground range is 2,800 meters. Helicopters, hell, it could take those down too. 40% accuracy and 6,000 rounds a minute, damn. Also carries 6 Maverick Cs, which are heat and also, unfortunately, are not fire and forget weapons, which would make this weapon even more just incredibly capable. This can stay on station for 105 seconds, so if you really want the enemy to turn those tanks around, this might be the good way to get them to turn around. It's got a nice smiley face on it as well, which is where the 10 extra points come on. It used to be 130, but they added a cool paint job to it. That's just a lie. I'm just being funny. So anyway, suppression on that weapon, accuracy 45%. Really, this is something that you really want to use to get the enemy to turn around, and this can take out a lot of stuff, especially if it's stationary. Try to hit moving targets with bombers and finish off with the A-10 Thunderbolt, this bad boy here. Really going to ruin the enemy's day. Don't use this against other aircraft. Keep this thing well defended. It does have armor too, by the way. 2 in the front, 2 in the back, 1 on the top and side as well. Hell, that's what I did last night with the ladies. Yeah, but hey, you're going to have all the ladies around when you destroy all enemy targets with this kind of aircraft. This thing is just a bad MF. Really ugly, by the way. It's known as the Warthog, but it gets the job done, and it is an insane weapon. Really, if you ever hear this thing fire in game, ooh, that's basically what it sounds like. It's just, it's awesome. So anything with the GAU on it, even if it's the back of the Harrier, and funny because you can't even see the GAU on this one. Someone let me know in the comments, by the way, where this thing's supposed to fire its cannon from. Is it up top or below somewhere we can't see? I'm not exactly certain. However, there's no mistaking where this GAU gun comes from. Damn. It's the thing, by the way, is like the size of a Volkswagen. It actually is all the way under the cockpit and everything. There's photos of it on the internet. But anyway, enough of that. So if you need to finish off a row of tanks, make sure you sit them still with artillery or something first, and then come in and finish off with the Thunderbolt. It's a big investment to destroy enemy tanks, and with no real ECM, only 10%, you better make sure that you've got the way clear for the Thunderbolt. Clear the way for the Thunderbolt so it can clear the way for your tanks and troops. And keep in mind, turn radius 150. Damn, that is extremely sharp, though of course the speed's only 500, so that makes up for it. That's kind of what... Wow, this guy is not sitting straight in the cockpit, if you notice that. He's leaning a little bit to the left. Gangsta lean. He's doing that Riker lean. So anyway, good to have you guys here. Thank you so much for watching. I know I didn't cover everything. Again, go ahead and debate and give your tips and tricks for aircraft down there. Of course, I feel like I have a lot to learn from aircraft since they're a big investment. There's something you want to call out as a specialty attack against your enemy. But don't forget to keep your password pimp hand strong. Bring the cornucopia of pain. Try out all these aircraft as well. Prices and everything is subject to change, so please keep that in mind before you make your deck. Thank you for joining me for What the Deck. Tell a friend, help us grow, all that good stuff. Like, comment, subscribe. Yeah, engage, baby. So until next time, this is Raptor for Lieutenant Commander Riker and Picard saying engage. Wait, I mean, goodbye. See ya.